Thank you so much, Carla. Thank you. And thank you to Dr. Getz as well for all your updates on research and everything that's so exciting to see happening. I'm going to try to find a photo to put up of my whole family because I'll be talking about them. So yeah, thank you for being here. Just for my frame of reference, and if you're comfortable, could you raise your hand if you have a child with CF? Okay, wonderful, and welcome. Um, I'm here to talk about room for joy in the age of modulators like Trikafta, Kalydeco, Symdeko, and Orkambi. But I also want to acknowledge there's a percentage of us who don't get to benefit from these drugs, either because of your mutation type or difficulty accessing it or side effects. And as a double lung transplant recipient, I'm in that group. I'm not on modulators, but thankfully I don't need to be. But my younger sister, Rachel, I have two sisters. She has CF as well, and the responsive mutations. And as the sister of someone who's taking Trikafta, I am immensely benefiting from seeing life change for the better. As I mentioned, her name's Rachel, and in 2 months, she'll be graduating with her MBA and becoming a financial advisor, which she achieved while working. One second, I just locked the screen. Which she achieved by working full-time and volunteering as a victim advocate with her police department, and she has completed 4 triathlons. Yeah. She is about to join a profession that helps people address the things we never thought we needed to worry about, like 401ks and retirement plans. I really think she should be the one up here speaking. I think you asked the wrong sister. But my goal today in talking about our life approach in this age of modulators is not to exclude the group who isn't benefiting yet from them, but to acknowledge that the conversation is shifting in the CF community. Our life expectancy as a whole is suddenly longer. And this presents not just a new set of medical considerations, but also a new set of existential questions about pursuing fuller lives. And I'm primarily here to bother you with the existential questions, because that's what I do best. But before we get into talking about joy, we all need to get comfortable with the idea of holding grief. And holding grief is a concept in my line of work. My consulting business focuses on social justice and advocacy storytelling. And this idea of holding grief is something that really emphasizes the importance of embracing loss and pain as natural parts of our life cycles and understanding the fluidity, not the finality of death, in the sense of change and growth and the birth of something new. There are a few parts of grief in the CF community that I want to acknowledge. People are still living and dying from the worst aspects of this disease. We talked about how people don't have access to modulators or they struggle with their side effects. And beyond that, there are people with or without modulators who feel isolated, or CF has taken lung function that they've been unable to recover, or they are struggling mentally or emotionally or socially because of this disease. People still experience disruptions in their lives that CF brings, antibiotic courses and fatigue and depression. I do work with 2 incredible organizations that address these co-occurring issues, by the way, because the cure is not the only goal here, right? Quality of life, mental health, and access to therapies are also critical goals that the CF Foundation focuses its research on. And I also do work with an organization called Breathe Strong CF, which provides exercise grants to patients and helps people meet their wellness goals. So there's so much need still in the CF community, and these organizations are really necessary in ensuring we are navigating this new era smartly. There's another part of grief that is a little harder to frame here, but I'll try. Grief can be a byproduct of any sort of change. And while CF doesn't define us, it certainly is a part of our identity. It is a whole body disease, meaning managing it at times has consumed our daily lives. It is also a family disease. meaning everyone close to us orients their lives to fight alongside us. As parents, the moment your child was born, your identity changed. And then the moment your child received a diagnosis, your identity changed again. To be vigilant caretakers, to understand a barrage of medical terminology you never expected to learn. And now you might have found you've become a different version of yourself, one that is equipped to respond with strength to the chaos, one that is emotionally resilient as you hold your child's hand through every blood draw, every tough doctor appointment, every PICC line. Now, when someone we take care of gets increasingly healthier, our roles and relationships to each other change. Where family members are conditioned to be useful, interdependent, highly responsive. Now, with modulators, that grip loosens a little bit. It's a similar feeling to when your kids go to college or move out, I'm sure. And it's okay to admit there are a lot of feelings in letting go of certain roles one might take as a caregiver, even in their adult children's lives. And I'll tell you, even my parents forget that I'm in my 30s. They still respond with the same vigilance and worry sometimes. I mean, we don't talk about bowel movements as much as we used to. It still comes up. That need to be a caregiver might never go away for a parent. One CF parent I met recently had a daughter who went blind due to malnutrition because she was diagnosed too late. Despite it all, her daughter completed college and was even a competitive runner, which is incredible. But the mom expected her to move back in after graduation, and she even put an addition on her house because she was just mentally preparing for her daughter to potentially live with her the rest of her life. And she was surprised when her daughter, who was thriving on Trikafta, approached her and said, "You know what? I think I'm going to get my own apartment." And I understood the mother's mixed feelings going into this. Of course, her daughter's independence is something to be celebrated, but she also admitted there's fear and even grief in letting your child go forth into this world with more freedom than you ever expected and to need you in different ways now. And for those who are older with CF, getting better means you might shake off some old parts of your identity, the parts of our disease that shaped the people who we are today. I want to acknowledge these things because, in the words of Khalil Gibran, your joy is your sorrow unmasked. That self-same well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Joy. Our experience with CF isn't just about pain. We have learned to cope with our illness with a dynamic way of being, including with assertive self-advocacy, a fieriness, and a desire for authenticity. I've met so many CF patients with this thirst for knowledge and a desire to just have this introspection and depth of thinking. And I've also met CF patients with this wild, disarming sense of humor and grace in the face of bad news, a tolerance for discomfort, even a yearning to take care of others outside ourselves. And we don't develop this way of coping alone. In high school, I spent weeks in the hospital for a lung infection, and I needed to get a feeding tube placed. And as a 17-year-old, of course, the only thought I had was, who's going to date someone with a G-tube? And I was really stuck in that wallowing. And the family life team came by to do a craft to cheer me up. And the craft was to make a stress ball with a rubber hospital glove and some clay they gave me. And I picked my favorite colors at that time, which were like this autumnal brown and yellow. But I want you to imagine brown and yellow clay mushed together and stuffed into a hospital glove. Just draw a mental image here. It was the ugliest thing I had ever made. And immediately the nurses on my floor had me laughing, like just rolling with laughter. And the point is, in those weeks, the nurses and doctors at Children's didn't put it on me to be strong or resilient. Instead, they showed me how to hold those dark times with a different emotion, even silliness or playfulness. So, in pursuing joy, we acknowledge how much ability we have to respond differently to our pain, no matter where our illness is. This mindset is important to remember because our adaptability is an asset here. In the age of modulators, the future feels big and mysterious and exciting. But I've also heard from CF patients that it feels intimidating at times. Many of us older patients have spent much of our lives with an understanding of our short life expectancy. It is a fact that just kind of hangs in the backdrop. And many have based certain life decisions around that. For instance, saving money maybe never felt necessary, or for some, attending college wasn't worth the investment, or having kids or dating was never on the table. These are things we might have foregone because of health reasons or simply philosophical reasons around how we wanted to use our limited time. This, too, is changing. Modulators have created space for many of us in the form of better health and more time, and frankly, more energy to engage life in a way that we couldn't before. And that means we are also looking at this big question differently. What is a full life? What does it look like for us? I can't answer those questions, by the way. But I can talk a little bit about what I've experienced and how my perspective has shifted since my double lung transplant. Where over the course of a few years, I had gone from the sickest I'd ever been to the healthiest I'd ever been. I'd gone from almost dying at age 21 to suddenly having more time to figure out who I was and who I wanted to be. My transplant was almost 13 years ago. It happened quickly, in a way I didn't expect. Shortly after graduating college, I caught the flu, then pneumonia complicated by bronchial malacia, which is a narrowing of the airway. As I got sicker, my weight dropped to about 79 pounds. I remember begging the nurses for some relief, any relief, because it was so hard to take another inhale. By the grace of an incredible medical team, Dr. Carla Frederick included, many of the nurses and respiratory therapists at Children's, I was airlifted to Cleveland Clinic, accepted on the transplant list, and received new lungs on my 22nd birthday. I really just want to take a second to applaud the Buffalo CF Center team. Yeah. Dr. Frederick was by my side when they finally took me off the ventilator, and she was there walking me through my first breath with the new lungs. So she's really amazing human being. Okay, so imagine emerging from open heart surgery at that age, let alone emerging from a lifetime that was so focused on daily survival, on trying to outgun cystic fibrosis with extra treatments and lung clearance techniques, calorie shakes and tube feedings, morning jogs, swimming after school, and pills on pills on pills. Not to mention, now I was faced with some towering statistical uncertainty of staying alive post-transplant, where 89% of lung transplant patients survive their first year, 74% survive their first 3 years, and 60% survive the first 5. I was physically alive, but I was constantly bracing myself for death because I was frantically searching for meaning and purpose. And I was perhaps justifying the purpose of my survival. I filled my borrowed time with to-do lists on overcommitting myself. I couldn't sit still. Even as I slept, I needed the TV on because quietness made my head race. This is a trauma response, by the way, which a good amount of therapy has helped iron out for me. But this trauma response was one mixed with survivor's guilt and a bit of bargaining with a higher power. It was also the result of a lifetime with CF. I had become so used to thinking short term, so used to guarding myself or halting my plans for a hospital stay or missing an opportunity because I didn't feel well. And now I'd been handed a second chance, this coveted thing that many of my CF peers, let alone my organ donor, Amber, who was only 14 years old, by the way, did not get. I was conflicted on what path I should take to honor that. So the first thing I had to do to work through post-transplant was really releasing myself from some limiting beliefs that I had internalized during my sickness. And by limiting beliefs, I'm referring to the stories we tell ourselves about what we're capable of. They may or may no longer be true. My bodily limitations transformed after my transplant. I was able to do much more, and I think people on modulators are experiencing this very same thing. It's incredible to suddenly be able to do more. And while we're not invincible to CF by any stretch, we need to challenge our brains and our bodies to re-explore and redefine what we are capable of. And my favorite example of this is my younger sister, Rachel, who I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, who used to believe she would never have the lung capacity to complete a triathlon. But when she started modulators, she discovered new ways her body could tolerate exercise little by little. To challenge these core beliefs we have always held in order to help us survive is a really brave position to put ourselves in. By the way, you don't have to start running triathlons or competing in triathlons to do this. I know I'm not going to. But it is an important step in carving out a new future for ourselves. I see this in CF patients who have decided to start families or carry pregnancies or who have started to work full-time or have traveled places they never thought they'd be able to. Before I went to Greece, just a few years after getting my tracheotomy placed, if you hadn't noticed, I have a tracheotomy, which was a result from my transplant. I was just lamenting to my doctor, "Oh, I just wish I could snorkel." And to my surprise, his response was really nonchalant. He just like shrugged and was like, "So snorkel." And it hadn't occurred to me that I could consider making it happen. I was really stuck in my beliefs about the limitations of the trach, about things I couldn't do, that I'd stopped thinking of ways to make the impossible happen. And guess what? So I stuck a tegaderm on this thing, and I've snorkeled in Santorini, off a sailboat in Antigua, and off an island in Hawaii where I could hear the humpback whale singing underwater. I wouldn't have had those experiences if someone hadn't challenged my limiting beliefs. A second major shift in thinking that I had after my transplant, one that took me a really long time to realize, is don't worry so much about purpose or the point of things, but rather about what fills you. Really, truly explore that. Look at your family and the people who surround you. What do they teach you about what's valuable? And you also explore this by engaging the world live, in person, 3D, because learning what fills you has to be a process of active engagement. It can't be passive. There's so much benefit in doing things for the hell of it. Recently, I've been taking tango lessons. I've been studying with an improv teacher to learn jazz on the cello. I backpacked 30 miles through the Smoky Mountains. I'm not doing these things because I'll be the best at it. In fact, I'm quite terrible at most of the things and uncoordinated. And every hiker within half-mile radius heard me heaving my way through the Smoky Mountains, I'll tell you. I'm doing these things because they fill my cup. They challenge me to grow, to set aside my ego, to be a humble learner. They're means to connect with people on a different plane. And to build that kind of community and connection for me has added so much depth to my life. So do things for the hell of it, to find out what your real values are and what fills you. And my third realization was that fulfillment can be small and understated. When we recount what is a full life, we really seem conditioned to talk about milestones like marriage and college graduation, longevity, and even ticking off places we've traveled. And while these are comforting markers, and they do mean something, They are merely symbolic in nature. They are surface level ways of illustrating the true depth of a life. I'll explain what I mean with a final story. During my weeks in the hospital as I recovered from the transplant, I was finally regaining some strength to move my own legs and sit upright and even walk again. I was finally out of the ICU, finally able to eat again, and I begged the staff to let me go outside because it had been over a month of being shut indoors in that sterile hospital room, with my only view being the halogen lit hallway. I think a lot of people might know what I'm talking about. And I really just wanted to see a blade of grass or a bee or something. I don't know. My transplant doctor said no, I couldn't go outside. But there was my dad, who is usually not deterred by authority. I actually think he enjoys being told no, so he can defy it. He procures a wheelchair, and my mom helps me dress in my finest sweatpants, and of course a mask. And underneath that mask, I am smiling ear to ear all the way down the hallway as my dad pushes me to the elevator. And every floor we descend, my dad and I are thinking, wow, we're getting away with this. And then about halfway down, the elevator doors open. And who's standing there but my transplant doctor? And he looks at me and he looks at my dad. And we know we've been caught red-handed, and I just feel my face flush with embarrassment and shame for disobeying the doctor, because that's the golden rule, don't disobey your doctor. But instead of scolding us, he just got this twinkle in his eye, and he turned and didn't say a word. And my dad and I roll out of the elevator cackling all the way through the front doors, like a couple of chimps escaping the zoo. And outside, there's this big round fountain. It's bright blue, and there's water spilling over the sides. And the sun is out, and it warms my skin. And the air smells like April. And it's my first breath being outside since the transplant. And it's my first breath really since the uncertainty of being alive. And I lean back and close my eyes, and I feel my dad there with me. And I know all the heaviness he and my family have held in those past months, or maybe my entire life. But in this second, he is happy. And I think, how do I stretch out a moment? How do I hold this sunshine? Sitting here with my dad in a way that makes it feel like I've experienced it for 100 years. A full life is about living with this presence, this attentiveness, so that even a little sunlight can produce joy, no matter where you are. Life develops its depth in the range of emotions we can feel in these human bodies of ours, our capacity for the extremes of grief and contentment, in boredom and exhilaration, in everything our skin can hold. Life develops its depth in what values we fight to uphold whenever a challenge presents itself, when we're told no, or we're told we're not enough, or we fail at our own expense. Life develops its depth in the times we choose to see another person and accept them fully and let them feel seen. Life develops its depth in the love we cultivate and leave in the wake of our movement, in everything we touch. In the age of modulators, we can take this new space to pursue the things that will make us whole. And I hope for all of you who are living with this disease that this is your moment to do everything in your power to live that life. Thank you. I'm also open to Q&A or questions. Carla, I didn't know if you were going to come up. Oh, yeah. This was me, since my birthday celebration is always my transplant celebration as well, because I got it on my birthday. That's my younger sister, Rachel, and my mom. This is me like toward the end of that 30-mile hike, and I was so tired and complaining. And this is my mom and me at a glacier where we just went to Argentina, in Patagonia, and got to see the Perito Moreno glacier. I think that's it. Yeah, and this is my sister and I in Hawaii.
Anyone have any questions for Katherine on the chat? And in this room? Incredible presentation. Of course, don't be shy. I know they took the bar away early, so you might be inhibited a little bit, but Katherine would love to talk to you. Who's going to plant the first conversation? Yes, Heather. Could you let others know what that is that you do to help others, whether it's somebody living with CF or their families, by using that impact grant to help them tell their story?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. And actually, we should have a cohort coming up soon where I work with families of people with CF as well as patients, tell their stories in various circumstances where we're called to do so. And it really starts with helping to unpack some of the medical trauma that we've been through so that we're ready to get up and talk without getting too choked up, which I already know my weak spot is when I talk about my family, but we really explore those things, and they really figure out what it is they want to tell about their experience with CF. And I'm going into a third year of the Impact Grant and feel very fortunate. I've been able to do that. If you are interested in joining one of the trainings, come see me. I can give you my web address for you to check it out. Oh, so someone asked, have you ever met your donor's family? I did write to, there's an organization that basically is a middleman for letters and things like that, and just to protect identity. And I did write a letter, and they wrote back, and we had a very touching exchange. I think it's of course a difficult thing to do, because for some families, especially a family that lost their child so young, it can be a healing experience, but it's also fraught with a lot of complex emotions. So, but it was really wonderful to hear about who Amber was and what her family was feeling.
How many years after your transplant did you meet your recipient? And you can be here because I think they want to see you.
It was about 3 years after. I think they tell you to wait a little bit of time because of the emotion behind it, and the loss that the family is going through and processing. But she was very grateful. The mother wrote me back, and she was very grateful because they had tried to reach out to multiple. One donor can save several lives, so they had reached out to multiple people who had received organs. So, and I was the only one that had gotten back, and she was just like very, very touched and excited to hear from someone who was at least some good had come out of a tragic situation.
And I guess I think you spoke on this, but what advice would you give to the young families here represented here?
Well, I'll give you the STRC response, which is compliance is really important. Um, um, And I think, I struggled with this when I was writing this speech because I think I was part of an era that was very difficult. We were losing peers, and we were really experiencing some of the grimmer side of CF. And there is so much hope right now. It's exciting, and it makes me just so happy to see families that are thriving. And so my advice is to really don't take it for granted and really remember that without that compliance, without really continuing to support this work, this research, uh, we won't keep pushing it toward the finish line. And we have to make sure that everyone can benefit from these advancements.
We have a question online that says, what is the biggest barrier to living with your whole heart that you're currently struggling with?
It's a deep question.
David B. brings deep.
Let's see. Well, I think money. No, I'm just kidding. Very high rents. No, I just think CF kind of teaches us to orient ourselves, not to look at the barriers as like something that's stopping you, but as something to like climb over or get around. And um, so when we think about our pursuit of happiness, it really has to be detached from the barrier, the thought of this is in my way, these are things I can't do. You have to think in terms of, well, these are all the things I can do, and this is what fills my life. And so it's a hard question to answer because of that.
I saw you had a tattoo of a molecule on your arm, and I just wondered what that was.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is actually part of Trikafta. And it's a great awareness tool because people always ask me, is that caffeine? And I say, no, it's a life-saving drug. And when it got approved by the FDA, my two sisters and I decided to each get a part of Trikafta tattooed on our arms. And so we did it, and then we went home and told my parents. Yeah.
One chat comment here says, we are part of an era that played together, then had to stay away. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that transition was so difficult. I mean, that's how we built a community, was we'd have family days where the kids would go off in a playroom and hang out, and the adults would get to share their experiences. And the rules have changed, of course. You know, connecting virtually has become really a blessing, and I encourage people to go to the CF Breathe Con because you really meet people, and they cover so many topics of what it is to live with CF. I just did a panel on dating with CF. It's a nuanced experience, whether you're on modulators or not. Like, it's, how do you have the big conversation with someone you're dating? How do you think about marriage and kids? And so there's a whole set of problems that really help to have peer support with. And so I say, be sure you reach out to, um, communities with lights. There are communities where there's like a lot of negativity that kind of feeds itself. I haven't found a lot of benefit from those. So I would just recommend in the virtual spaces where you're navigating community, go toward light.